The Hells Angels, one of the most feared and infamous motorcycle clubs in the world.
And there was an outburst in the courtroom this morning as closing arguments were being heard in the triple murder trial of a member of the Hells Angel Motorcycle Club.
From their beginnings in post-war America to their terrifying legacy of crime, violence, and drug trafficking, they have fascinated and terrified the public for decades. But how did a group of leather-clad bikers evolve from rebellious misfits to a global criminal empire? This is the dark truth behind the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. It all started in 1948 in Fontana, California, just east of Los Angeles. The world had barely recovered from World War II, and many veterans found solace in riding motorcycles, seeking the adrenaline rush they once felt on the battlefield. Among them were the founders of the Hells Angels, a name inspired by bomber squadrons from the war. What started as a brotherhood of free spirits quickly became something much darker.
The term of life without the possibility of parole.
The audio recordings were damaging to me, to my defense.
Prosecutors say 48-year-old Jay Witt will serve a mandatory 22 and a half years in prison.
Roughly a dozen members of the biker gang were in the courtroom for Lancia's final moments of freedom.
The group prided itself on being outsiders, men who didn't conform to the rules of mainstream society. But as the club expanded, so did its reputation. Soon, local law enforcement started noticing a troubling trend. Biker gatherings were becoming hotspots for crime. Fights, robberies, and even reports of sexual assault started surfacing, setting the stage for the gang's notorious reputation. By the early 1950s, the club had begun expanding beyond its original California roots, establishing chapters in San Francisco, 1954, and Oakland, 1957. The group's lawless reputation was growing, but it wasn't until 1961, when the Hells Angels went international with a chapter in New Zealand, that the world started to take notice. In the 1950s and 1960s, Hollywood and the media began to romanticize outlaw biker culture. Movies like The Wild One, 1953, starring Marlon Brando, and later films such as Hells Angels on Wheels, 1967, painted bikers as rebellious anti-heroes. But the reality of the Hells Angels was far more sinister. In 1965, California Attorney General Thomas C. Lynch published a damning report detailing the club's extensive criminal activities. The public was shocked to learn that this so-called brotherhood had amassed hundreds of felony charges, including rape, drug dealing, and murder. However, instead of deterring them, the report only increased their notoriety. The Hells Angels thrived in their newfound infamy, using it to recruit more members who wanted to be part of this dangerous underground world. They also began forging alliances with other criminal organizations, including drug cartels and arms dealers, to strengthen their power and influence. The group's reach extended beyond mere gang activity. By the late 1960s, they were deeply embedded in organized crime networks that facilitated narcotics distribution, illegal weapons trade, and extortion rackets. Law enforcement agencies struggled to keep up with the growing menace. As police cracked down on individual members, the Hells Angels adapted, using coded communication, intimidation tactics, and a strict hierarchy to shield their operations. Their reputation as ruthless enforcers meant that few were willing to testify against them, further enabling their rise to power. But things took a truly violent turn in 1969. It was meant to be a free concert, a West Coast answer to Woodstock. On December 6, 1969, the Rolling Stones were set to headline the Altamont Free Concert in California. To keep things under control, the event organizers made a terrible mistake. They hired the Hells Angels as security, reportedly paying them in beer. As the day wore on, the crowd grew restless. The Hells Angels, notorious for their short tempers, began violently beating audience members with pool cues and motorcycle chains. Then, the unthinkable happened. 18-year-old Meredith Hunter, an African-American concertgoer, was stabbed to death by a Hells Angel named Alan Pissarro after pulling out a gun in self-defense against the gang's aggression. The murder was caught on film and later became one of the defining moments of the dark side of the Hells Angels, immortalized in the documentary Gimme Shelter, 1970. Though Pissarro was acquitted on grounds of self-defense, The damage to the Hells Angels' reputation was irreversible. They weren't just rebels anymore, they were killers. Over the decades, numerous Hells Angels members have gained infamy for their crimes. Some of the most well-known include Sonny Barger. Perhaps the most famous Hells Angel, Barger was the longtime leader of the Oakland chapter and played a crucial role in expanding the club's influence worldwide. George "Baby" Huey Weathern, a former vice president of the Oakland chapter who later became an informant, exposing the club's deep involvement in organized crime. Maurice "Mom" Boucher, a Canadian Hells Angel responsible for leading violent turf wars in Montreal, resulting in the deaths of multiple police officers and civilians. Otto Friedli, one of the original founding members responsible for splitting from another biker gang and forming the Hells Angels. By the 1970s and 1980s, the Hells Angels had evolved into a full-fledged criminal syndicate, operating across North America, Europe, and even Australia. Their involvement in drug trafficking, particularly methamphetamine production, became a major source of income. The gang was no longer just about motorcycles. It was about power, fear, and control. They started engaging in brutal turf wars with rival gangs like the Mongols and Outlaws, leading to countless murders, bombings, and ambushes. Law enforcement agencies, including the FBI, classified them as an outlaw motorcycle gang, OMG, placing them alongside organizations like the Italian Mafia and the Mexican cartels. During this time, the club also established a sophisticated money laundering network, funneling illicit drug money through seemingly legitimate businesses such as tattoo parlors, strip clubs, and auto repair shops. This allowed them to expand their influence while evading law enforcement. Undercover operations by the ATF, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, and FBI led to several high-profile arrests. But the Hells Angels always found ways to bounce back, using fear and violence to silence witnesses. Becoming a Hells Angel isn't just about riding a Harley, it's about absolute loyalty, and sometimes that loyalty comes at a deadly cost. Members go through an intense initiation process, which can include violent hazing, criminal acts, and unwavering obedience to senior members. Some are tasked with proving their worth by committing felonies such as assaults, drug trafficking, or even murder. Once accepted, quitting is nearly impossible. Those who attempt to leave must return all club-related regalia, including their famous death head emblem. If they refuse, the consequences are severe: beatings, torture, or even execution. The brutality extends beyond the club's own ranks. Outsiders who dare to disrespect the Hells Angels, whether through words, actions, or even wearing imitation club insignia, can face brutal retaliation. Numerous cases have surfaced where civilians, rival gang members, and even journalists were attacked or killed for speaking out against the club. Some have vanished without a trace, while others have been found beaten beyond recognition. The Hells Angels operate by a strict, fear-enforced code, one that has kept them among the most feared outlaw biker gangs in history. Despite decades of relentless law enforcement crackdowns, the Hells Angels remain a formidable force in the global underworld, with hundreds of chapters spanning 6 continents. From North America to Europe, Australia, and even parts of South America and Asia, their influence extends across international borders. The club insists that it is simply a brotherhood of motorcycle enthusiasts, yet mounting evidence suggests otherwise. Authorities point to their deep ties to organized crime, drug trafficking, and brutal acts of violence as proof of their criminal nature. The U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, and Interpol classify the Hells Angels as a high-risk criminal organization, identifying their involvement in activities ranging from murder for hire and arms smuggling to extortion and large-scale methamphetamine distribution. The gang's notorious reputation has led to major international police operations, resulting in high-profile arrests and seizures of weapons and drugs. However, the Hells Angels have continually evolved, using encrypted communications, front businesses, and intimidation to maintain their empire. The question remains, with such deep-rooted power and influence, can law enforcement ever truly dismantle this notorious group, or will the Hells Angels continue to thrive in the shadows of society? Are they just rebels on 2 wheels, or are they one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in modern history? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the world's most notorious criminal groups. Stay safe and see you next time.